Okay, it's just you and I here, so you can be frank. When was the last time that you or someone else in your organization complained about product? I'm guessing chances are it hasn't even been more than a day, right? For some reason, it seems to us like this is the regular stance we ought to have when it comes to the most important collaborators we have in the organization as engineering teams. And that is viewing product as this group that's always not perfect, always not doing something right. It might be how you view them, it might be how your managers view the product managers, whatever it is so common. They are too slow, they don't understand the product enough, they don't understand the technical parts enough, they don't communicate well, they give us product specs that aren't fleshed out enough or too late, etc., etc., etc. There are so many complaints, I'm sure, and I'm certain that a good chunk of those are legitimate. If you want to create an organization that's genuinely remarkable, you have to understand, first of all, that it takes two to tango. Your organization and product have to work hand in hand in order to make this thing succeed. So just sitting there being all like, and complaining is not going to get you anywhere. The question is, what can you do constructively to make things better and start delivering amazing software that has a genuine business impact? And this is where you as a leader can have so much leverage in creating the right culture and setting the right expectations. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can create real collaboration with product to drive really dramatic impact and fast. And it's based on lessons and insights I've seen and gained working with all the startups I've helped through the years. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, consultant, and coach, and I help people like you create teams worth leading because life is just too short to lead mediocre teams. I want to, right off the bat, start with what we are getting wrong in our mindset, and that's something that maybe you need to fix or maybe you need to help your team adjust. But this is critical to succeed in any sort of will to create real healthy collaboration with product. That is the mindset of we cannot keep complaining. It's the easiest thing to do, and anyone can whine, especially if you're a senior engineer and you're really good at being cynical and saying what's not working and spotting all the bugs everywhere and explaining exactly every single point where the product spec has some vagueness or ambiguity that they should have thought about earlier and coming back to them, etc. However, as long as we have this mindset, every time that we have to work together, we expect them to hand us these perfect product specs from which we can continue on working, never having to discuss anything with anyone ever till we push to production. That is just never going to happen. And if it is going to happen, it's not a good thing. We have to realize that product, let me tell you something, they're just as human as you are. And whenever I hear teams complain about product specs not being perfect and having to have these fixes or clarifications, I start with asking, when did you start pushing code to production, having pull requests that never get any comments, not having any issues, there's never anything you have to roll back, any bugs, no one ever has any complaints. Once you ship something, that's solid. You commit it and you know that's done. I'm guessing that's not really how you work, right? So why can you and your team allow yourself to have this? Oh, we're just human. There's no zero bugs, really. We have to develop. We have to iterate. Why can you have this? And yet when it comes to looking at our product counterparts, we look down on them and think they have to do everything perfectly. That's not just unfair, it's just not practical. We have to start with this mindset adjustment. Stop expecting them to ever be at that level. At least not until your team achieves what I just described as that sort of amazing utopic future where we can just push code and everything always works. If you cannot do it, why would you expect them to be the same? No one works like that, and you're not NASA. And therefore, instead of trying to push there, instead of lamenting that, hey, why isn't this perfect waterfall where we define everything perfectly and only then hand it off to the sacred engineers to create, realize that we don't operate like that, and that is actually part of our core strengths. We realize that things are never done, are never perfect. We expect to have this collaborative, iterative sort of work. And when we realize that's what's going to happen, we make space for a lot of healthy things to happen down the line. Because again, you're not going to be Oracle. Why try to copy how huge organizations work just because you're boo-hooing about having to comment something on Jira or Linear and ask for clarification? Grab someone that's like literally in the desk next to you and ask them a question. Oh my God, you can do that. And of course, anything has to have a healthy balance, because if we're talking about every single line of code needing some clarification, then we have to fix something. But in general, I want you to start with this mindset adjustment. There's no longer expecting them to do something that you yourself cannot do, you wouldn't be able to do if you were in their shoes. And you have to drive this home with your managers, with your ICs. They all have to understand that this is impossible. Sometimes this is something that you have to address by helping your managers and coaching them in how to collaborate with people who are outside of engineering. This is an amazing room for improvement and growth for many first-time engineering managers, and this is actually one of the things I recommend the most to choose as your personal growth goal if you're implementing the impact coaching framework in your organization. By the way, if you want to hear more about that, this video is sponsored by me, because I'm having a free live stream real soon about this. And if you reserve your spot right now, not only will you be able to attend and ask questions live and get the recording later, you'll also get my free short ebook about the impact coaching framework so you can implement this with your people. And this session is going to be about how you help your managers, how you coach them specifically to become better managers, which then turn into force multipliers in your organization. So I'm waiting to see you there. So now that we have this adjusted mindset and we no longer have expectations that are unreal, the next thing we need to do is talk about how collaboration actually looks like or should look like in your organization. I've told so many people in the past that I forbid the use of the word handoffs in organizations, because what we're essentially trying to do is say, I don't want to really work or collaborate with those people. I want to have handoffs, which is code for have them write to me everything they need me to do, and I will never have to talk to them again. That, again, is not how things work. Even if you understand the mindset we just talked about, and then you continue and go back to talking about needing the right handoffs, you're essentially saying, I don't really believe the mindset. When we have these processes that try to make things all too strict, what we end up getting is organizations where we treat our counterparts as if we're communicating via API. And again, unless you want to be replaced real quick by AI, you better be able to communicate very well and closely with your counterparts outside of engineering, because if everything was described so perfectly for a perfect handoff to engineering to implement, never having to talk again, I probably could replace you very quickly with AI. Like, the clock is ticking, man. So don't go there. Realize that actually this gray area, the sfumatura between engineering and product, is actually where we have so much to gain. So stop thinking about handoffs and embrace the iterative work process here. So to do that, I want you to look at how you're planning things right now and consider whether you're planning every sprint in a way where you're assuming that everything comes to engineering after it has been completely broken down. They just need to implement it, meaning that you probably don't have enough of margin within the sprint. Or do you expect to have enough of healthy collaborative, iterative work here? So we know that something is described, the product spec has, let's say, 80% certainty, but we know that we're going to have to ask questions and work on it together as we're implementing it, and things might change. We have that amount of healthy margin in it. Do you have enough of collaboration happening before you commit to something? This is another major issue I see with many startups, where we expect product to break things down enough and then just give it to us, not having had a healthy discussion with engineering, with design, with everyone involved in this to ensure that what we're committing to actually makes sense. 37 Signals call this stage shaping. You can call it whatever you want. I know a lot of people like pre-planning for some reason, but the point is, we want to collaborate at a higher altitude about the bigger features with product together, so we at least understand that these things make sense. When we're talking about this is something that we'd like to complete in 2 weeks, a month, whatever, that it even makes sense, that we're not assuming things that will actually require a lot more time, etc. So this is the higher altitude shaping process. And if you understand that this should happen before we commit to things and put them on the sprint, and with that, it means that your senior people are probably always regularly having these conversations with their product counterparts, thinking ahead about things that will be committed to in a few weeks. Then we already have started this iterative process. When we eventually get things to implement, some people already know them better, and we are more likely to be able to implement them correctly when we actually have to. So stop thinking about these handoffs and realize that this is a back and forth. We have a very friendly tennis game going on where things go back and forth, and of course we also have others involved. Maybe it's people from sales, from marketing, from QA, customer success, whatever. Very rarely should you expect to just have things flow in a very simple, streamlined, one-directional process, no matter what your task management tool tells you. Then I want you to realize that you should not expect anyone to choose things for you or your people. And this is related to the perfect product specs that we might have in our imagination. What we want to see is work that makes sense, but not detailed to the level where we have no questions. And when I talk to people about this, sometimes they say, yeah, but I'm starting to implement, and if I'm getting blocked on these questions, that I cannot be really effective, etc. Yeah, of course, but you have to find the right balance. Yet again, that means that I don't expect my product counterpart to write down everything in a way where I just essentially have to turn their pseudocode into code because they have written about every possible edge case. Instead, I want you and your people to constantly welcome these conversations. When you have questions, you actually view these as growth opportunities for you, because there are two things we can achieve when we go and ask why and how things should be done. First of all, you gain context. When you see something, you don't just say, hey, what do I need to do this here if this happens? But you want to gain the context, understand the reasoning behind something. Why, in this case, is it important for us to allow a quick undo as opposed to just saying, yeah, let's handle it silently and send an email to someone? You need to understand the business thinking behind things, what leads them to this decision. Because when you have this context, it means that when you have all of those nano decisions that engineers have to do with almost any single line of code, when you have context, you're going to make more of those decisions by yourself and correctly, even if you don't realize that this is actually a decision. You're just doing what feels like ought to be done. If you have the context, chances are you're more likely to do the right thing in the first place. But second, every time we understand something like that, every time we learn and comprehend more about the business, it means that down the line, we'll be able to spot opportunities for doing things in a different way. Or even right now, when you ask why enough, you might realize that they're asking you to do something because they want to achieve X, but you see that X is actually something that you might be able to achieve in a different manner. Maybe there's a shortcut. Maybe we don't have to do all of this and handle all of these edge cases if actually we're just trying to get to this and see that it makes sense. So understanding this, understanding the context, having these conversations instead of expecting people to just tell us exactly what to do means that we're able to find good solutions, better ways of doing things, and having creativity go on. This actually brings me to the next point, which is don't expect to have kumbaya between product and engineering. You have to maintain a healthy tension between the two. When we ask why, when we push back regularly, not to be argumentative, not because we want to work as little as possible, but because we want to understand, because we want to be real peers in this process as opposed to feature factories. When we have this tension and people regularly ask why and drill deeper and understand exactly the context, what you're getting is this healthy tension that means that sometimes we'll have ideas about better ways of doing things, or different ways, or a workaround here, or we see that something is actually going to be costly to implement. And because we have this tension, and because people ask why, like we just said, they might push back and say, are you sure? Because maybe this is not something that we have to do right now. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But when we have this process, this conversation, we can see things actually succeed. Story time. I actually used to be quite a good coder, and I could code almost anything way faster than almost anyone else around anywhere I worked. Humble brag. But at the beginning of my career, I realized that this was actually not doing me a service, because product would come and say, we need you to do this, and I could just take those specs and implement them, even if it was hard, if it was complicated, it wasn't trivial. Because I was so quick to do things, I could do something that others would say, oh my God, this is going to take a month. Are you sure? I was like, yeah, I can do that in a week or a week and a half. Sure, let me do that. And only then, after I completed it, would we realize that, oh, actually all of that work wasn't necessary and we could have cut time. I learned that even if something is not that hard to do, you can gain so much. And this is when I talk about tripling impact per engineer, it's not about typing fast. It's about ensuring that what we do matters. So I learned that if I ask why, if I don't think that my role is just to do what product asks, but instead see myself as a peer and understanding that we are working together, we have to find the right solution, the right way of achieving our shared goals, which we'll talk about in a minute. When I realized that, we worked together in a way that allowed us to find usually the right amount of work, like Goldilocks. I didn't implement too much, I didn't implement too little. We found the middle path that allowed us to deliver the highest amount of ROI, the best impact for the business. And when you achieve that regularly, sprint after sprint, things compound so fast. So having this healthy tension can sometimes make all the difference in the world between having a feature factory and in an engineering organization that's genuinely remarkable. And as I promised, let's talk about these shared goals. You need to understand that there's no one-sided success here. You as a VP of engineering, as a CTO, cannot say at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year, yeah, we did good. We did everything we wanted to do. It's just that product didn't tell us the right things to do. You have to realize that this is the most important relationship as a VP of engineering, for example. Your VP product counterpart is the most important relationship you're probably going to have in the company, and no one side can succeed without the other. So I really recommend having at least some of your objectives or goals, whatever you want to call them, be shared. Understanding that there are things that both organizations are responsible to achieve. So when you have an OKR for the quarter and it's about unlocking new business ideas, about improving the churn or conversions or whatever, these things are things that you work on together to decide about how you're going to tackle them. You have the shared ownership, so you think about the way, you talk constantly throughout the quarter about how you're going to achieve it. And when you eventually do achieve your goals, you celebrate it together because this is shared. Yeah, maybe they have to think about some grander strategy or have some product customer interviews about things down the line and do product discovery. Maybe you have to tackle things such as making sure that security is on par or having all sorts of improvements you want to do. But the main chunk of the work has to be shared goals. And our last point of improvement for your relationship with product is no black holes. I regularly see teams, engineering teams that say, we want to have 10% or 15% or 20%, or I've even seen 30% over time be allocated engineering time. And when you do that, you essentially are marking off a bunch of time and telling product, yeah, I know what to do. You are in charge of the features when we work on that, but you and your team take responsibility for a lot of things because you have tech debt or whatever. Now, I've written and have videos about this fallacy, and I'll link to those maybe in a card on screen or in the description. But quickly, I want you to understand something very important here. When you're doing things, be it tech debt, be it handling bugs, improving scalability, improving performance, whatever you think you ought to do in this sacred time chunk you have every quarter, think about this. Who's to say that the time you're allocating there is actually more important, would have more impact than whatever feature is not getting done in the meantime? You need to have this ongoing collaborative discussion with product and always together prioritize what you're doing. So if you think it's critical to handle the tech debt in that system, in that queue, in that database because of I'm sure you've got your reasons, make the business case to product. Explain what you have to achieve if you do that, how much time you're going to save or the costs, or what are the risks of not handling this, and we might end up in a couple of more bigger clients realize that the server no longer can operate at the rate we promise our clients, whatever. Make the business case and then have product prioritize it when they view everything. Does this require more work? It sure does, but it means that we're utilizing our time much more efficiently because we're not doing things just because we have time. And I'm not saying you're being intentfully wasteful of time. No way. But when you already have that 20%, it's so easy to start with something important, but then a quarter or two passes, and without noticing it, we're doing things that actually, if you viewed the other things on our backlog, they're not necessarily important enough. When we have to constantly make the case for why something is important, we actually have the ability to ensure that what we're doing is worth doing. Again, impact per engineer, if you want to see it skyrocket, as I explained in my orange book over there, then we have to ensure that whenever we're doing something, it makes sense to do it. It has the right ROI. Otherwise, we're just, having some fun as engineers, which is important, but not something I think should be entitled to 30% or even 15% of your time in the organization without having to answer to anyone about it. If you implement these concepts, some of these might be harder to do, some of these might be easier, I can promise that you will see your impact per engineer skyrocket, you will see your team being much more effective, and actually they will all become more senior faster, because I find that having the ability to communicate and collaborate with product is one of the key soft skills that many engineers are missing in order to progress in their careers. And when we have them do this, we're essentially creating a very healthy sort of pressure cooker that helps them grow and become senior faster. We're creating the right atmospheric pressure in a good way to help people grow faster, and that's a win-win, right? So look into these. If you have any questions, my email's in the video description and I'll be glad to answer. And again, check out the link to my upcoming free live stream, which will also get you the free Impact Coaching Framework ebook. Thank you.